Good morning. In order to get into our study, I'd like to go to 2 Thessalonians Chapter 2. I want you to notice here that Paul is trying to tell us about what is going to be happening just before Jesus comes in the clouds of heaven. What's going to be happening on planet Earth? I'm going to start reading from verse 3. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until a rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. So Paul is saying here that in the end of this world's experience, in the closing hours of this world, there is going to be a falling away of God's people, a falling away from following God. They are going to allow themselves to be taken over by the deceptions of the devil. The Bible also clearly tells me here in the writings of Paul that before that also happens, the man of lawlessness will be revealed to us. It says further in verse 7, for the secret power of lawlessness is already at work. So Paul is telling us that from his time the devil was already active, but there was a restraint on him. We read this. It says there in verse 6, and now you know what is holding him back, so that he may be revealed at the proper time. Now, dear friends, I honestly believe that that proper time is what this fifth trumpet is trying to reveal to us, and I'm going to show you that today. Now, to carry on with our study, I want to go to Revelation chapter 9, and I'm going to be reading verse 2. It says there, when he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke of a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. Now, dear friends, here's a lot of information already. Yesterday we discovered that the star that had fallen from the heavens down to planet Earth and that had the key in his hand was none other than the devil himself. We discovered that the key was the means by which you unlock prisons, you unlock places that have been confined to a particular area. It's interesting that Jesus indicated in Revelation chapter 1, in verse 18, that he holds the keys to life and death. So we see here that the devil was given a key, and he approaches the abyss, and we find out that the abyss was a place of constraint. God has, as we've just read in the writings of Paul, placed a restraint on the activities of the devil. But he is now about to be released. The angel is given the key from God, and he unlocks the abyss. He unlocks this prison house where the angels have been restrained from doing what they want to do. And then it says there, as he opens up the abyss, smoke rises up out of the abyss. Smoke like that from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke of the abyss. So immediately my attention is drawn to the smoke, and it's the smoke of a gigantic furnace. Now, in order to understand this better, I've written down 4 points that we gain as we study God's Word as to what smoke symbolizes in Revelation here. And the first one I want to draw your attention to is in Genesis chapter 19, verse 28. When Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by the fire that fell from God, it says that there was smoke that rose up from those cities. And it was evidence of a fire, a great fire. So immediately I want you to understand that smoke is only found where there is a fire. It's evidence of something being destroyed, something burning up. I want you to listen to this because it is important. It's interesting that this star which falls from the sky is given a name. And that name is found in Revelation chapter 9, verse 11. It says there, and I'm going to read it to you. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss. So the angel of the abyss, the one that is going to unlock, they had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek Apollyon. Now the word abandon and the word of Greek Apollyon actually means destroyer, one who has destructive abilities. So we find that this star has one thing in mind, and that is to destroy the things of God, the things that God has created. And so we see the smoke rises up. Another thing that we pick up about smoke, as we read in Psalm 102 verse 3, and that is that smoke is temporary. The moment fire has burnt out, winds come and they can blow smoke away. So this activity of the devil is not going to be a long-term thing. In actual fact, it's going to be so aggressive, the smoke is going to rise, but the moment it's all over, the smoke will blow away. The next thing we pick up about smoke in the Word of God, and we find this in Proverbs chapter 10 verse 26, that smoke, when it gets into your eyes, has an irritating, blinding effect. So I want you to notice that the people on planet Earth, because of the smoke, we don't see quite clearly what's going on, and the smoke is burning our eyes. What is going on with us, what is happening, the destructive actions of the devil is in some sense blinded to our understanding, because he is cloaking himself with smoke, and it's difficult to understand what is going on. I want you to also notice that in Isaiah chapter 6 verse 4, that smoke is used as a cloak. It basically hides a presence. The presence that it is hiding in this particular story is the presence of the devil and his activities on planet Earth. That means we can't see what he's doing. He's cloaked himself in darkness, in smoke. I want you to notice that as a result of the smoke, that the sun was darkened and that the sky was darkened. It's interesting, dear friends, when you do have a fire and smoke rises, it seems for a moment as if there is darkness on planet Earth. But the darkness is actually just the smoke that is cloaking the light of God, hiding us from the presence of God. It's almost like clouds. Sometimes when the clouds are formed over the sky, we can't see the sun. But it doesn't mean that the sun is not there. It's just that we can't see it. And the sun here symbolizes God. I also want you to notice that the sun is darkened. And in some way, the activities that are taking place here are almost blamed on the sun. It's almost as if what is happening, the devil has so well disguised that when people look at it, they say it's an act of God. But in reality, it's the devil's handiwork. Now, in order to explain this better, I want to go to the book of Hebrews, and I'm going to read there from chapter 12. Paul says there in verse 1, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith." Dear friends, I want you to understand that although there is this blindness going on, we are to fix our eyes on Jesus. And that there is a cloud of evidence as to what's really going on. I'm going to show you this as we go on. I also want you to notice that in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, we read this in verse 11. "These things happened to them," and it's talking about God's people, "as examples, and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come." So Paul is saying that these things, as we discover what is going on in this fire, as we discover this, it was given to us as warnings of what is going to happen to us in the end of time. Now, dear friends, in order to make this clear, I want to take you to the story that we find recorded in the book of Job, Job chapter 1. Now, the interesting thing here is I want you to be conscious of the fact that Job is oblivious to what is going on planet Earth in his life. He's just going about his daily activities as normal. But we read this in verse 6 to 12. One day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth on it." So we get this clear impression that the devil is restrained to planet Earth and is roaming up and down, getting involved in his activities. This is something I want you to be aware of, that we are allowed to see through this trumpet what is really going on. God is revealing to us, as we've read there in 2 Thessalonians, what the devil is doing. It says further, "Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.'" It's almost as if God is looking down on us, and the devil has said to God, "I've come from planet Earth," and God says to him, "You know, Satan, have you seen my followers on planet Earth? They are upright and blameless. They fear me and they shun evil." It's almost as if we need to understand that when we've taken our stance for God, something is going to happen to us. Then in verse 9, Satan says to God, "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied, "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has?" So he's saying to God, the reason why Job serves you is because you always look after him. You're prosperous to him. You protect him from my handiwork. You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. It's so interesting that Lucifer challenges God and says, if you put your hand against him, if you take away your restraining influence on him, that you will do harm to him, he will curse you to his face. So the devil is saying to God, stretch out your hand and cause damages. But I want you to notice something, dear friend, that at this very moment the sun seems to be darkened by the activities of the devil. It's almost as if God's getting the blame for something that is about to happen. But I want you to notice something that God says in verse 12. The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. I want you to understand something, that we all of a sudden see something that God is revealing to us through this trumpet. That the activities that are taken on planet Earth is not God's hand in us. The earthquakes, the fires, the pestilences, all of this is not God's hand. I want you to see that the devil is trying to give the impression that it is an act of God. He says, "God, you stretch out your hand." But God turns this around and he says to the devil, "No, I'm placing him in your hands." And dear friends, what is happening on planet Earth is nothing but the actions of the devil. The destructive, the destroyer is out to destroy God's kingdom, to destroy his people, to destroy his planet. You must see this clearly. In the story of Job, we find this to be very clear, and I'm going to be coming back to Job tomorrow. But to round off our study today, the trumpet blowing of the fifth trumpet introduces me and opens up to my understanding the activities of the devil in the last days. But it's not new activities, dear friends. He's been doing this all the time. It's just that he's done this so well that we have not seen that it is his actions, but that we notice and we tend to say it's the actions of nature or it's an act of God. But we see quite clearly revealed in the blowing of this trumpet, in the smoke that disguises everything, the fire and the destruction that is about to take place, is the handiwork of destroyer. Dear friends, Jesus has invited us to receive ourselves so that we can truly see what is going on. And as we see what is really going on, it'll be time for us to choose God, or to allow ourselves to fall under the destructive forces of destroyer. What are you going to do?